Jackson Hayes had seen his fair share of trouble. He wasn't the kind of man who crumbled under pressure, but he'd been bent and broken more times than he could count. After his wife died in a hospital hallway waiting for a doctor who never came, he was left with a toddler in diapers, a mortgage he couldn't pay, and a heart full of unanswered questions. That was 6 years ago. Since then, he'd learned to survive the quiet way, one bolt, one repair, one day at a time. Now, at 42, Jackson ran a small auto shop out of a steel-sided barn just outside of Fort Bronson, Wyoming. The town was small, the sky wide, and the air dry enough to crack lips. His daughter Emily, now 8, was the only reason he still smiled. She had her mother's brown eyes, her giggle, and her compassion for people even when they didn't deserve. It was a Tuesday evening when the sky turned the color of copper and the clouds rolled in like a slow-motion avalanche. Jackson had just closed up the shop when he saw her. A black government SUV sat still on the edge of a gravel road, hood up, hazard lights flashing. That stretch of road barely saw 2 cars a day, and the storm coming looked angry. Jackson hesitated. Something told him to keep driving. Government vehicles were trouble. But his daughter had once said, "Dad, never leave someone alone when it's raining." So he turned around. As he pulled up beside the SUV, he rolled down his window. Rain hit his arm as he leaned out. "You all right, ma'am?" he asked. A woman stepped out from behind the vehicle. She was tall, straight-backed with short-cropped black hair and piercing steel-blue eyes. Her uniform, drenched and clinging, bore the insignia of a high-ranking officer major general. "I'm fine," she said firmly, glancing at his truck. Jackson raised a brow. "Your engine's steaming and the nearest service station's 60 miles. You sure you're fine?" The woman sighed. "I blew the radiator. Backup's an hour out." "Well," Jackson said, "storm will hit in 15. Got a daughter at home making boxed mac and cheese and probably setting the kitchen on fire. I'd feel better knowing you weren't standing out here catching lightning." She narrowed her eyes. "I'm not fragile," she said. Jackson smiled. "Didn't say you were, but I got a warm truck and coffee, and the mac and cheese might be oversalted." After a pause, she nodded curtly and climbed into the passenger seat. Inside the truck, the rain began to beat harder against the windshield. Jackson reached over and adjusted the heat. The woman next to him sat with her spine rigid, her uniform soaked, water running down her face like it was nothing. She didn't speak for a while. "Coffee's in the thermos," Jackson offered. She glanced at it, then him. "You always pick up strangers?" "Only the intimidating ones with medals," he said with a smirk. Her lips twitched, almost a smile, almost. "Jackson." "Hayes," he said. "Mechanic, Dad, owner of Hayes Auto, world-class expert in duct tape." She turned to him. "Major General Cassandra Mackenzie." "Strategic Defense Command?" Jackson nodded slowly. "Big title." "Big mess," she muttered, mostly to herself. "The wind howled outside." Jackson could feel the tension rolling off her in waves. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her uniform, despite the rain, was pressed sharp. No wedding ring, no smile lines. Her hands were still clenched even in the warmth of the truck. "You need a place to dry off," Jackson said finally. "My house is 20 minutes that way. There's hot food and a fireplace. You can call your people from there. I have a sat link." "They're already coming." Jackson shrugged. "Still offer stands. Emily'll be thrilled. She's got this thing about women in uniforms. Thinks they're real-life superheroes." Mackenzie didn't answer. But when the lights of town appeared through the windshield, she finally said, "All right." Emily's eyes went wide when she saw the uniform. "Are you in the Army?" she whispered as she handed General Mackenzie a towel. "I'm in the Army," Mackenzie replied, drying her face. "Are you a general?" "Yes." Emily turned to her. "Dad, is she the boss of all the soldiers?" "Pretty much," Jackson said. Mackenzie sat by the fire, boots off, staring into the flames. Emily curled up with a coloring book, sneaking glances. Dinner was awkward, mac and cheese and canned green beans, but warm. Mackenzie barely touched hers. When the military escort finally arrived, Jackson walked her to the door. "Thanks," she said softly. "For what?" "For not asking questions, for being normal." I'm a mechanic with a kid and a mortgage. That's all I know how to be. She opened the door but paused. If I ever call, will you answer? Jackson blinked. Sure, she nodded once. And was gone. 2 weeks later, a Humvee parked in front of his shop. Emily ran to the window. She's back! General Mackenzie stepped out in civilian clothes this time. Still rigid, still unreadable. I meant what I said, she told Jackson. I need you. You need your radiator fixed again? I need your brain, Jackson laughed. That's a first. But she wasn't joking. My team is falling apart. Engineers hate the security guys. Logistics won't talk to field ops. The software people don't respect anyone. I've got the best minds in the country and we're weeks behind. Billions are at risk. A third of our systems don't even talk to each other. One bad decision could start a war. Jackson swallowed. And you want me to observe, listen, fix the culture. Tell me where we're going wrong. I trust you. He stared at her for a long moment. I can't leave Emily. She can come. He blinked. You're serious? Dead serious. 3 days later, Jackson. And Emily boarded a government jet. The facility was buried deep beneath a Colorado mountain, part command center, part data fortress, part bunker. Red badges, fingerprint doors, guns everywhere. People stared. Who's the guy in jeans? Who's the kid? Jackson didn't care. He started walking the halls, listening, watching. At lunch, he sat with the techs. In the halls, he talked to security. He fixed a jammed vending machine on day 2 and suddenly became everyone's friend. Emily spent time in a converted schoolroom. She made drawings for soldiers, baked cookies with the cafeteria team, and even gave a speech on why adults should stop yelling. It became a running joke that Emily had done more for morale than 6 months of team integration seminars. By week 2, Jackson had mapped out everything. Not on paper, in his head, he told General Mackenzie, it's not the tech. It's the walls. Everyone's scared. Scared of failing. Scared of being blamed. So they hide behind rules. They cover their asses. That's not teamwork. That's fear. She nodded. I've felt it too. You need transparency. Small wins, trust, and someone who can translate between departments. I'm not military. Exactly. Jackson became the unofficial fixer. He sat in on meetings. Asked questions no one else dared. Told stories about fixing tractors and raising a kid. And in every story was a message, clear, human, real. One day, the satellite imaging team refused to share their software with the battlefield AI group. Jackson brought them donuts and asked, what if you two were married? How would you share? The TV remote? They laughed, but they talked. That day, the two systems integrated for the first time. At a monthly strategy meeting, a visiting general asked, why is the mechanic speaking before my deputy? Mackenzie stood. Because the mechanic saved us $3 million last week by suggesting we check our cooling systems before blaming the software. Silence. Then nods. Respect. As months passed, the base transformed. Walls came down. Literally and metaphorically. Jackson instituted coffee crossovers where people from different units were forced to have lunch together. At first it was awkward. Then it became a highlight. He invited local veterans to speak. He organized a father-daughter pancake day. He fixed a broken generator in the data center during a power crisis. And he never once asked for payment. All the while, General Mackenzie watched. She started smiling more, laughing, even telling stories about her own childhood in Nebraska. Her father who served, her brother she lost. She started becoming human again. On the 100th day, the Pentagon sent an inspection team. They toured the base, looked at numbers. Spoke to officers. When asked what had caused the miraculous turnaround, General Mackenzie handed them a napkin. On it was written, systems fail when people stop trusting each other. Signed, Jackson Hayes. At the end of that day, the Secretary of Defense called Mackenzie. You're being given command of the national network and you're mechanic. He's now your chief civilian liaison. She looked at Jackson. He was playing cards with Emily and 2 junior engineers. She smiled. He won't like the title, but he's already earned it.
The lights above the school auditorium flickered as students filed into their seats, excited for the annual talent show. Parents whispered in the crowd, teachers smiled politely, and backstage, performers rehearsed their routines one last time. Among the group of colorful, glitter-covered students was a girl who didn't look like she belonged. Her name was Zara Malik. Zara wasn't dressed in a sequin dress or flashy makeup. She wore an old maroon shirt, frayed jeans, and shoes that had clearly been repaired more than once. Her guitar, slung across her back in a scratched black case, had belonged to her late mother. While the other students whispered encouragement to their friends, no one stood beside Zara. She sat alone, eyes fixed on the floor, listening to the sounds around her. Zara's father, Mr. Malik, had worked at the school as a janitor for nearly 10 years. Everyone knew him, the quiet man with kind eyes who mopped the halls and fixed broken lockers. They also knew about his daughter, but only in passing. To most students, she was the janitor's girl, someone not quite one of them. She was a shadow, easy to ignore, easy to mock. Whispers started the moment Zara's name appeared on the performance list. Some students laughed, others rolled their eyes. "She's actually performing. I thought she was just helping clean up afterward. Maybe she's here to tune someone else's guitar. I heard she lives in the janitor's closet." The laughter stung, but Zara was used to it. What she wasn't used to was performing. She had never sung on stage before. Her audience had always been one, her father. After her mother died in an accident 5 years ago, the guitar became her refuge. Late at night, while her father slept after long shifts, she would quietly strum the strings and sing songs she wrote about grief, love, and dreams that didn't seem meant for girls like her. Now, she was minutes away from playing one of those songs to a full auditorium. Backstage, her father gently approached her, still in his work uniform, holding a damp rag he'd been using to wipe down chairs earlier. He saw her trembling fingers and knelt beside her. "You don't need to prove anything to anyone," he said softly. "Just sing your truth, that's all. You've already made me proud." Zara looked into his tired eyes and nodded. "Amma," she whispered. Her name was called. As she stepped onto the stage, a wave of murmurs rolled through the crowd. Some students snickered. A few took out their phones, expecting a performance they could laugh about later. The spotlight hit her, and she blinked into the brightness. She walked slowly to the center, placed her guitar on her lap, and sat down on the stool. She didn't look up. She closed her eyes and remembered her mother's voice, the way she used to hum while cooking, the gentle songs she would sing while brushing Zara's hair. The memories steadied her hands. She strummed the first chord. It was soft, so soft it barely registered at first, but the note hung in the air like a breath held too long. Then came the second chord, and the third. Each one stronger, deeper, filled with emotion. Then she began to sing. Her voice wasn't trained. It wasn't powerful in the technical sense, but it was real, honest, raw. It carried the weight of every lonely night, every moment she had been ignored, every tear she never let fall in front of others. The lyrics told a story of loss, of struggle, of dreams buried and unearthed again. The words painted a picture. They said the girl with calloused hands could never touch the sky. They laughed at dirt beneath her nails and never asked her why. The audience fell silent. All the whispers, all the jokes, they vanished. The principal leaned forward. Teachers exchanged glances. Students who had been texting stopped mid-message. Her voice, once drowned in silence, now filled every corner of the hall. She sang about her mother, about watching her father scrub floors so she could go to school. She sang about how music gave her hope when the world gave her nothing else. Every word came from a place so deep, so painfully honest, it cut through pride and privilege like a knife. When she sang the final note, her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. She let it ring, imperfect and human. She opened her eyes slowly, blinking at the stunned crowd. Then the auditorium erupted. It began with a few claps, then more. Then the entire room rose to their feet. A standing ovation. Applause echoed through the hall like thunder. People were crying, cheering. Some students who had mocked her earlier stood motionless, mouths slightly open, unsure of what had just happened. Zara stood up, bowed her head slightly, and walked off stage, heart pounding. Not with fear, but release. Backstage, everything was quiet. No one dared speak first. Then someone clapped slowly. Sarah Khan, the student council president. One of the very people who had laughed at Zara only an hour before. She walked toward her. That was beautiful. I'm sorry. I had no idea. Zara gave a small smile. You don't have to know someone to be kind. Her father pulled her into a hug. He didn't say a word. His silence was filled with pride and awe. Later that evening, someone uploaded her performance online with the caption, "Janitor's daughter silences everyone with one song." Within hours, it was shared across social media platforms. By morning, it had gone viral. Thousands of people watched it. Some moved to tears, others inspired. Zara received messages from all over the country. People told her how her song made them feel seen, how they too had felt invisible, how she had given them hope. Among the viewers was a well-known music producer based in Lahore, Ms. Laila Saeed, who ran a foundation for underprivileged artists. She reached out to the school, asking to meet Zara. "I've been in this industry for 20 years, she said when they finally met. "And rarely do I hear a voice that isn't just talented, but true, you've got both. I'd like to offer you a scholarship at my music institute." Zara stared at her in disbelief. Her father blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. "Me?" Zara asked. "Yes, you, but only if you promise to keep singing like no one's watching." The scholarship changed everything. For the first time, Zara had access to instruments, mentors, and opportunities she never dreamed of. But she never forgot where she came from. She carried her old guitar with her everywhere, a reminder of why she started. She wrote new songs, inspired by her journey. Her music wasn't polished in the way industry voices often are, but it was full of meaning. Listeners connected with her, not just because of her voice, but because of her story. At 19, she released her first album, Dust and Dreams. It topped indie charts, not for its production, but for its soul. At her first concert, a packed crowd waited in silence as she walked on stage. And sitting in the front row, in the same uniform he wore when he used to clean the school halls, was her father. She took the mic and said, "Many people tried to silence me, not with words, but with doubt. But my father told me something when I was little. He said, even if the world forgets your name, sing it into the sky." That's what I did. She sang the same song that silenced the school auditorium years before. But this time, she didn't sing it in fear. She sang it as someone who knew her voice mattered. By the final note, thousands in the crowd stood applauding, cheering. She had arrived, not in spite of who she was, but because of it. Years later, when Zara was interviewed on national TV, the host asked, "If you could go back to that school stage, what would you say to your younger self?" She paused, smiled gently, and replied, "I'd say, don't hide who you are to fit in. Shine so bright they can't ignore you." Moral of the story, never judge a person by their background or the uniform their parent wears. True greatness often comes from the quietest corners. Respect, kindness, and understanding cost nothing, but they have the power to change lives. Everyone deserves a chance to be heard, and sometimes the ones we ignore are the ones who hold the most beautiful stories within them. The summer sun scorched down on the luxury Sapphire Grand Hotel, one of the most elite establishments in the city. Inside its marble walls, The air conditioners buzzed like usual, except in one critical suite. On the 14th floor, where the hotel's VIPs stayed, the AC had failed. And not just in any room. This was the presidential suite, currently occupied by none other than Richard Alton, billionaire CEO of a global investment firm. A perfectionist by reputation and a control freak by nature, Alton did not tolerate discomfort or delay. The hotel staff panicked. Multiple technicians had tried to fix the unit, but none succeeded. Pressure built on the general manager, who had run out of options. That's when one of the junior staff members quietly suggested a name, Meher, the freelance mechanic they sometimes called when things really got messy. "She's fast, cheap, and weirdly good," he said. Within 20 minutes, Meher arrived, covered in grease, wearing worn-out overalls and an old baseball cap that barely contained her thick, curly hair. The staff hesitated. She wasn't what they wanted a guest like Richard Alton to see, but they were out of time. The heat inside the suite was rising, and so was the CEO's temper. Meher entered the suite quietly, toolbox in hand, eyes scanning the room quickly. She said nothing to the suited staff members lining the walls or the assistant pacing near the door. She simply went to the unit and started working. Richard Alton sat on a velvet couch, fanning himself with a magazine. He looked up, expecting a report. Instead, he saw Meher's boots, then her stained shirt, then her face, focused, calm, and unbothered. "Who the hell are you?" he snapped. Meher glanced at him briefly. "I'm here to fix your AC." "You?" He raised an eyebrow. "You look like a car mechanic." "I am," she said, opening the panel. "Among other things," Alton scoffed. "Well, this should be entertaining." For the next 20 minutes, Meher worked silently while the room filled with awkward tension. She moved with precision, adjusting valves, checking the circuit board, resoldering a couple of connections. Her fingers were quick, and sure, she didn't fumble or guess. Alton kept glancing at her, as if waiting for her to fail. Then with a soft click, the unit hummed back to life. Cool air whooshed into the room. The silence that followed was thick with surprise. She stood up, wiped, her hands on her rag, and said, "You're good now, but your thermostat wiring is outdated. You should replace it within 6 months or it'll go out again." Alton stared at her. "Wait, that's it?" "That's it," she said, packing. "Up, stay a second." His voice had changed, more curious than annoyed now. "You sound educated." She gave a half smile. "I am. You work with your hands, but you speak like a professor." "I get that a lot." "What's your story?" he asked, leaning forward. Meher hesitated. "I don't think you really want to know. I just watched you fix a system my best techs couldn't handle. Now I'm interested." She sat on the edge of a low table, brushing dust from her palms. "I was supposed to be someone else," she began. "I grew up in Istanbul, but I've lived all over. Rome, Tokyo, Dubai, Lahore, Johannesburg, Paris. My father was a diplomat. I grew up in embassies and boarding schools. I spoke 7 languages by the time I was 14. I was on track to join the Foreign Service." Alton blinked, processing. "So what happened?" "My mother died in a car accident when I was 16, she said quietly. "My father resigned, fell into a depression, and within a year, we were broke. We moved back to Karachi. I couldn't afford university anymore, so I did what I had to do, got a job fixing things." "You taught yourself?" he asked, clearly stunned. "Mostly. I liked working with machines. They make sense when people don't. And people stopped making sense after my mom died." Alton sat back, silent for a moment. Then, "You speak 7 languages?" She nodded. "English, Urdu, Arabic, French, Japanese, Turkish, and Italian." He looked down, then laughed, a rare, genuine laugh. "You just shattered every stereotype I had about mechanics." I tend to do that, she said. Alton was quiet for a moment longer, then stood and extended his hand. I misjudged you, badly. Thank you for fixing my AC. But more than that, thank you for reminding me that talent has no uniform. Meher took his hand, firm and unapologetic. You're welcome. The next day she received a call from Alton's office. He was hosting an international business conference at the same hotel and requested her as the tech supervisor for the entire event. She was stunned. She had never managed an event of that scale, but they insisted. The CEO said if anyone could handle it, it's you. The event was massive. Delegates from over 40 countries with complex AV systems, lighting setups, simultaneous translation booths, and more. Meher led a team of 12. She solved problems before they happened, spoke to each delegate in their own language, and ran the show with quiet command. People thought she was part of the senior management. No one imagined she had walked in as a mechanic just days before. After the event, Alton called her to his office. I want to fund your education, he said. Anywhere you want to go. You're one of the smartest people I've met, and I'm not letting the world waste that. Meher was stunned. I don't know what to say. Say yes. And someday, help someone else who reminds you of you. She did say yes. With his support, Meher enrolled in an international engineering program. Years later, she completed her master's in sustainable energy systems from Germany. She started her own company, Fixer, which trained women in low-income neighborhoods to become certified mechanics, electricians, and technicians. Her story spread across platforms. News outlets called her the multilingual mechanic turned mogul. But she never cared about the spotlight. What mattered to her was the network of women she helped lift out of poverty, one tool and one skill at a time. She would often return to the Sapphire Grand Hotel, not as a worker, but as a guest speaker, invited to inspire other young entrepreneurs. Every time she entered, she wore the same grease-stained cap. Not because she needed to, but because it reminded her of who she was and how far she had come. In one of those events, a young girl came up to her nervously and said, "They all say I won't amount to anything, that I'm too poor, too quiet, too different." Meher smiled and placed a hand on the girl's shoulder. "Then you'll surprise them, just like I did." Moral of the story: your outer appearance doesn't define your intelligence, your voice, or your worth. People may judge you by your clothes, your job, or your background, but your skills, your heart, and your perseverance will speak louder than any stereotype. Talent is everywhere. It just needs a chance.